My true story from Georgia. My son said, "We're keeping it small. Please don't come to the baby shower." But I was the one who paid for everything, so I took it all back. I was walking down the hallway of my son's house, carrying a basket of freshly folded baby onesies, soft cotton, pale yellow, still warm from the dryer, when I heard laughter coming from the guest bedroom. The door was cracked slightly, and I paused, intending to knock. Then I heard my name. That mom. She doesn't match the aesthetic. That was his voice. My son. The baby I raised on coupons and lullabies. The one I stayed up all night with when he had the flu. The one I worked 3 jobs for when his father left before the ink dried on our mortgage. His wife's voice followed high and smooth like syrup on glass. We love her, but it's a very curated event. Pastels, greenery, not her, knitted look. Everything she owns is either floral or beige. The photographer will quit on the spot. They laughed, all 3 of them, my son, his wife, and her mother, who had only been in our lives for 3 years, but now stood in my place like she'd always belonged there. Then came the one that did it. "She raised me, sure," he said. "But she is not raising this child. If she doesn't show up, it will save the day." I leaned against the wall. There was a pause, then her mother's voice drier than the others. "It's not that we don't love her. It's just she's so sad. Like the ghost of disappointment." More laughter. No one even tried to whisper now. "Her gifts are always secondhand," my daughter-in-law added. "Her energy is depressing. No one wants that near a baby." I stood there with that basket in my hands, the folded onesies pressing into my ribs. I stared at the wall, tracing the paint trim with my eyes so I would not cry. I could not cry. Not there. Not with them 2 feet away. Still chuckling, still planning how to erase me without making a scene. I turned quietly, walked back down the hall, and placed the basket on the edge of the couch like I had never heard a word. My fingers shook as I smoothed the sleeves on the tiniest outfit, a soft green sleeper with little white ducks on the feet. I had found it at a vintage shop and hand-sewn a missing button. It looked brand new. It was brand new because love makes things new. But they would never see that. Not anymore. I sat for a long time in that room, listening to the laughter drift through the vents, letting every word etch itself into my spine. I had paid for everything: the cake, the venue, the monogram banners, the hand-painted welcome signs. I had spent hours coordinating with vendors, driving across town for centerpieces, writing checks with my name on them while they sent digital RSVPs with hers, and now I was a ghost of disappointment. Too sad, too beige, too much. I wanted to storm back into that room and scream. I wanted to rip down every pastel garland and throw the guest list in the fire, but I did not. Instead, I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. No tears came, only something harder, something older. Resolve. I would not beg to be included in my grandchild's life. I would not gravel for a seat at a baby shower I paid for, but I would take back what was mine. Every dollar, every decoration. Every bit of effort they had stolen and stamped someone else's name on. I would not shout. I would not weep, but I would remind them that I was not someone to be edited out of their story like a smudge on a photograph. I was the frame they had built their life inside. And if they did not want to see me, I would make sure they saw what happened when I disappeared. It started with a phone call in late February. The air was still sharp with winter, but the sound of my daughter-in-law's voice came through warm and excited. "We're doing a baby shower," she said, almost breathless. "Something sweet and simple. We thought maybe April before I'm too big to enjoy it." My heart fluttered. I had waited for this moment years, honestly. After a lifetime of holding it all together, of giving until I was bone-tired and invisible, here was something I could give that would finally be celebrated. A shower for the next generation, a gathering of joy. My first grandchild on the way. "I'd love to help," I said softly, "or host it if that's all right with you two." There was a pause, a quick inhale, and then that would be amazing. And just like that, I was in. I threw myself into the planning like it was a mission. I hadn't felt this alive in years, not since I was young. Stringing streamers for birthday parties we couldn't afford, baking cakes out of pancake mix, hiding tiny gifts in pillowcases just to make my son smile. This was different. This time I could do it right. I researched themes. Little woodland animals won out. Soft greens, gentle browns, cream accents. I found a local florist who agreed to do centerpieces with eucalyptus and baby's breath. I booked a venue with big windows and light hardwood floors. I ordered place cards shaped like baby foxes. They wanted a photo booth. I made one from scratch using driftwood and linen and fairy lights. It looked like something out of a magazine. I handwrote the invitations. I contacted a bakery that specialized in watercolor fondant and custom sugar cookies. I sent them a copy of the baby's ultrasound, which they turned into a delicate cake topper, edible, but I knew no one would dare bite it. It was too perfect. I even embroidered tiny linen napkins with the baby's initials, LR. For Liam Edward or Lily Elaine, they hadn't decided yet, but either way it felt real. The registry was modest, so I added my own extras. A top-tier stroller, a handmade bassinet from a Vermont craftsman. I found an antique glider rocker and reupholstered it myself in sage velvet. My fingers ached for days, but I didn't care. Every time I signed a check, I smiled. This wasn't a sacrifice. It was a joy. It was a privilege to pour myself into this. I called vendors in the morning and painted signs in the evening. I made spreadsheets. I packed boxes. I sewed bunting by hand. I even learned how to use Canva just to design the welcome board. Every night before bed, I whispered a little prayer over the folded list on my nightstand. Let this be beautiful. Let them feel loved. I imagined their faces walking into that room wide with wonder, overcome with gratitude. I imagined my son pulling me into a hug and saying, "You did this for us." I imagined my daughter-in-law actually looking me in the eye for once, maybe even smiling like she meant it. I counted down the days. 30, 21, 15. I made a little countdown calendar in my kitchen, tearing off the pages like an excited child before Christmas. Every box that arrived I opened with reverence. The ribbon, the tiny socks, the wooden toys with the smooth edges. I laid them all out on my dining room table just to admire how much love could be bought and wrapped when it came from the right place. And it was love, even if they never saw it that way. Even if they thought I was too much or too involved or trying to control things, that wasn't it at all. I just wanted to be part of something that mattered, to give what I never had when I was their age, to make them feel safe and seen and celebrated. And yes, maybe, just maybe, I wanted to matter too. I wanted them to know I was still here, still capable, still full of love, still part of the story. I had no intention of stealing the spotlight. I didn't want a seat at the center table or to give a speech. I just wanted to be in the room when the people I loved most stepped into something beautiful and knew deep in their bones that someone had done this for them. Because that's what mothers do. We build things we never get credit for. We stitch joy into napkins and hold it in our hands until it aches. We give not for recognition, but because it's the only language we know. And for a brief window of time, I believed truly that this time it would be different. That they would see me. That they would smile and say, "She made this, not for attention, not for herself, just because she loves us." But now I knew they never saw me. They only saw the aesthetic, and apparently I did not match. The call came 2 weeks before the baby shower. I was in the middle of wrapping individual lavender sachets in pale green tissue paper. Little thank you gifts for the guests. The kind of detail people might overlook, but not me. I wanted everything to feel intentional, like love. The phone buzzed on the counter. My son's name lit up the screen. I smiled, wiped my hands on my apron, picked it up. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. There was a pause, a breath, then his voice, lower than usual, almost rehearsed. "Mom, listen. I need to talk to you about the shower." I froze, lavender still clinging to my fingers. "Of course," I said. "Is everything okay?" Another pause. "Yeah, it's just we've been talking and, well, we've decided to keep it really small." Small? I had booked a venue that held 50. "I thought it already was small," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Yeah, but even smaller, more intimate. Just close friends, mostly from Hannah's side, her college friends, some of her mom's circle, you know." I felt the first tremor then. "So, should I adjust the guest list or—" "No, Mom. That's the thing. I think maybe it's better if you don't come." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "You'll throw off the vibe," he added quietly. Like I was a bad ingredient in a perfect recipe. "I'll throw off the vibe," I repeated. He rushed to explain. "It's not personal, okay? It's just you have a lot of presence. You're kind of intense, and the energy we're going for is super calm, earthy, soft, you know, pastelly. I had just finished hand-tying pastel green ribbons around the sachets. "We love you," he said quickly, like a script. "And we're so grateful for everything you've done. Seriously, you've been incredible. It's just for this one thing. We're asking you to step back. I still couldn't speak, so he filled the silence. We'll FaceTime you. We'll send tons of pictures. You'll feel like you're there. I felt like I had been dropped into freezing water. I paid for it, I said finally. He cleared his throat. And that's part of why it's going to be so special, because of everything you've made possible. He said it like I was a sponsor, not his mother. Don't make this harder, Mom. That was the last thing he said before he hung up. I stood there for what felt like hours. The sachets were still unfinished, the glue gun still warm. I opened my email. Sure enough, the most recent guest list had a few edits. My name was gone, deleted cleanly without ceremony. In its place, under hostesses, were 3 names: Hannah, her mother, and a woman I barely knew, her mother's best friend, I assumed. Someone who had never changed a diaper or scraped together rent with a baby on her hip. I scrolled further. There was a new floral order, same budget, same color scheme, but the note now read, "Kindly credit design inspiration to Donna R. and Melissa L. Donna, the mother-in-law, Melissa, her friend." I went to the shared photo album we had been using for planning. My folder had been removed, the images I had uploaded, my calligraphy samples, the fabric swatches, the handmade baby banner gone in their place, Pinterest boards, white roses, rented antique prams, faux vintage. I was being replaced, not just physically, but retroactively, scrubbed from the narrative like a ghost. And worse, everything I had paid for was still there, still happening, still being claimed by someone else. I sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by ribbon and dried lavender and little green boxes with thank you tags. And I felt it all at once, not just heartbreak, but shame, like I had offered too much of myself, like I had hoped too hard, like I had forgotten the lesson I thought I had already learned 100 times. That in this family love only had value when it was invisible. I had given them the celebration of their dreams, and now they were packaging it in someone else's name. I felt proud. Yes, because it would still be beautiful. I felt humiliated because I had made it easy to erase me. And above all, I felt rage, a deep, steady flame under the surface, because it wasn't just about a party. It was about being told after everything that I didn't belong, that I wasn't enough, that I was too real for their curated dream. I looked around at everything I had made, and I knew they didn't deserve it. Not like this. Not without seeing who had put it all together, who had poured themselves into every detail, and they were about to learn. I was not just a name you could delete from a list. The shower happened on a Saturday afternoon in April. The kind of spring day that feels more like summer. Blue skies, light breeze, everything in bloom. I stayed home, not because I had something better to do, but because I had been told not to come. I tried to distract myself. I made tea, I swept the porch, I watered the lavender I had planted in the backyard. But by 2 p.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the empty space where the gift baskets had been stacked, only a week earlier. Now the house was too quiet. The silence heavy and smug, like it was mocking me. My phone buzzed. Photos, lots of them. They had created a shared album, and someone had added me to it, either by accident or cruelty. I still don't know. I opened it anyway. The venue looked beautiful. My flowers, my rented chairs, my handmade table runners, the garlands I had ironed myself to keep them from creasing in the spring humidity. The photo booth exactly as I'd built it, driftwood, linen, fairy lights. But now adorned with a new sign that read, "A gift from Donna. Donna, my daughter-in-law's mother." In picture after picture, she stood proudly beside the cake, the banner, the gifts, as if she had orchestrated every detail. And maybe she believed she had. Maybe in her world, writing a check was vulgar and visibility was everything. Maybe her presence made her the author. But I was the one who sewed the initials onto the napkins. I was the one who stood in line for 2 hours at the bakery. I was the one who negotiated the floral arrangement price down by 30%, with the promise of future referrals. And yet there she was, holding center court, smiling with her daughter, with my son. In one picture, I saw something that made my stomach turn. It was a shot taken in front of the custom backdrop wall, the one I designed. Pale green, soft whites, small wooden blocks spelling out Baby R in delicate font. In the photo were all 3 women, my daughter-in-law, her mother, and me. But it wasn't me. It was a Photoshop. Someone had taken an old photo of me from a birthday 2 years ago and pasted me into the corner of the group photo badly. My skin tone didn't match the lighting. My eyes were looking in the wrong direction. The proportions were slightly off, and my feet didn't align with the carpet beneath them. They tried to make it seem like I had been there, but not enough to include me for real. Just enough to check a box. I scrolled through the comments on social media. The public ones were polite, beautiful, so blessed, stunning shower. But in a private message thread sent to me by a friend, bless her soul, were screenshots of texts between two of Hannah's friends. She paid for all of this, didn't she? Yeah, I heard she even did the cake and the decorations. So why isn't she here? Apparently she's difficult. They didn't want the vibe ruined. Wow, that's cold. She got what she wanted. She just didn't know when to stop. That last line hit me harder than I care to admit. She got what she wanted. As if love was a transaction. As if presence was punishment. As if generosity demanded silence. I closed the phone and sat still for a long time. Long enough for the sun to move from one side of the room to the other. I imagined them unwrapping the gifts. I imagined them reading the little tags with names that weren't mine. I imagined the guests asking polite questions. And I imagined the lies. Oh. Donna coordinated everything. Melissa helped with the baking. It was all a team effort. But I knew the truth, and so did they. They could cover my face with pixels. They could scratch my name off the guest list. They could erase me from the memory of that day, clean as linen in bleach. But they could not change the origin. They could not rewrite the effort. They could not unknow that the woman they erased was the one who built the thing they celebrated. That every flower, every cupcake, every photo backdrop was a thread from my hands. They could not unmake what I had made, even if they pretended I was never there. I did not cry the day after the baby shower. I did not yell or call or confront. I did what women like me have always done. I cleaned. I swept the kitchen floor. I folded the laundry. I had ignored during all those weeks of planning. I put the lavender sachets into a drawer. I wrapped the leftover ribbons and returned them to their storage bin, each motion quiet, deliberate, almost sacred. By the end of the afternoon, the only evidence that I had ever touched that shower was the dent in the dining room table where the gift baskets had sat for weeks. And then I sat down with my laptop. One by one, I logged into every vendor account. The bakery, the florist, the venue, the photographer, the rental company. Every last reservation had been made in my name, every check signed by me, every invoice routed to my email. They had taken what I gave, but I had never handed over control. And now I took it all back. With steady hands, I sent cancellation notices. With calm, courteous language, I withdrew deposits. And in one final email to the venue manager, I wrote, "Please redirect the reservation under my name for Saturday, April 15th, to the Children's Aid Society of Georgia. They will be using the space that afternoon. I am donating it in full." The reply came within the hour. "Consider it done." Then I emailed the bakery. The custom cake was already made, non-refundable. I told them to deliver it anyway, but not to the original address. Instead, I gave them the name of a shelter I had once donated clothes to, a place for young mothers. They deserved a celebration more than anyone. The centerpieces rerouted. The toys and books I had purchased and labeled with love, donated. The rocking chair delivered directly to the shelter's nursery. Everything they had claimed. Everything they had painted over with their curated aesthetic, I reclaimed and repurposed. Not for revenge, not yet, but because I refused to let my love be used as decoration and discarded as inconvenience. I called the director of the shelter, a woman named Trina, with a voice like warm sunlight. "I know this is last minute," I said, "but would you be open to hosting a little gathering this weekend? There's food, decorations, even a cake. No strings attached." She was quiet for a beat, and then I heard her voice catch. "We've never had anything like that," she whispered. "You do now," I said. Saturday came again. The same sunshine, the same spring air. But this time, I was not watching social media photos of a party I had funded but been banned from. This time, I was there. Trina greeted me with a long hug. The room was simple. Folding chairs, handmade streamers, balloons tied to door arc knobs. But the joy was real. There were 10 young mothers. Some with babies in their arms, some expecting. They laughed, they cried, they opened gift baskets and gasped at the softness of the baby clothes. They took turns in the photo booth, grinning without shame, holding each other with the gentleness of people who had been through too much too soon. One of the girls, barely 18, held up the ultrasound cake and said, "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me." I stood back and watched. No one knew my name. No one asked me to speak. No one needed to know. But they saw me. They saw what I had created, not as a backdrop, not as an aesthetic, not as a vibe, but as a gesture, as a gift, the way it was always meant to be. At the end of the event, Trina came to me with tears in her eyes. "Why did you do this?" she asked. "Why now?" I smiled. "Because they didn't want me," I said. "And you did." And that was enough. I went home that night tired, but whole. Not because I had taken anything away from them, but because I had finally given something to someone who saw it for what it truly was. Love without condition, joy without performance, presence without permission. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking. It took less than 24 hours for the storm to hit. On Sunday morning, my daughter-in-law posted a photo on Instagram, a picture of her standing alone under a blank backdrop holding her belly, the caption carefully curated. Today was supposed to be our baby shower. Instead, someone we trusted took everything away from us. No party, no gifts, no family, just heartbreak. Betrayed by blood, grief and pink. It exploded. Comments poured in. Friends, influencers, distant cousins who had not sent a Christmas card in a decade. OMG. What happened? I'm so sorry. This is horrible. Who would do that to a pregnant woman? Within hours, my son posted to his own page. We tried to give our child a beautiful beginning. We didn't think a parent would take that from us out of spite. No names, but everyone knew. People started speculating in the comments. That's so cruel. Who does that to their own family? Entitled boomers ruining everything. She probably wanted to control it, and when she couldn't, she pulled the plug. Classic. It didn't stop there. Screenshots spread across platforms. Reddit threads popped up. Someone tagged a parenting blogger with 500,000 followers who reposted the story with a caption. If you're lucky enough to be invited to the beginning of a child's life, show up with love, not ego. I watched it all unfold in silence. For once, I didn't feel the urge to explain. But truth, like water, always finds a crack. 3 days later, I released a simple post. No hashtags, no photos, just a scanned PDF of the itemized invoice file along with a caption that read, "Transparency is not cruelty. Every item, every vendor, every dollar was mine." I simply chose to give it to those who would be grateful. Love, Jane. There it was. Venue $1,200 paid by Jane Armitage. Cake and catering. $1,500 paid by Jane Armitage. Florist, $7,850 paid by Jane Armitage. Decor gifts and favors $2,643.75 paid by Jane Armitage. Rocking chair, handmade, delivered, paid in full. Jane Armitage total $5,678.75. The comment section was quiet for the first hour. Then came the shift. I'm sorry, but if someone paid for my whole shower, I'd thank them, not exclude them. Reading the receipts now, this woman was erased. She didn't steal the event. She reclaimed it. The tide turned. Their narrative fell apart. And not because I screamed louder, but because I documented what they tried to bury. I didn't need to argue. I just showed the truth. And in that truth, I reclaimed not just my role, but my voice. The backlash came quiet at first, just a trickle of raised eyebrows and vague apologies from people who had once rushed to defend my children. Then it turned. The parenting blogger who had shared my daughter-in-law's tearful post issued a correction. After reviewing new information and direct financial documentation, it's clear this story had more than one side. Respect to those who give silently and reclaim loudly. Then came the headlines. Local media got wind of the receipts. The same pastel-filtered family that had once been praised for their inspiring journey to parenthood was now at the center of a controversy titled The Grandma. They erased a baby shower gone public. Articles recounted the timeline. They quoted both sides. But the public didn't need convincing anymore. They had seen the screenshots. They had read the line items. They had watched a woman get scrubbed from her own generosity and fight back without a single insult, and they chose a side. Clients began backing out of my daughter-in-law's homestaging business. She manipulates the narrative too much. One review read, "What's curated and what's just cruelty?" My son, who worked in marketing, lost a brand contract over public trust concerns. No one said it outright, but their image, the golden couple with the boho nursery and the farmhouse chic life, was cracked now. You could see the seams. The curated calm had a rotten core. And I said nothing. I didn't post again, didn't gloat, didn't retaliate. I just watered my lavender, walked my little rescue dog, Penny, ate my toast with honey every morning at the same window. I had already had my say. Truth had done the rest. I heard they tried to patch it back together. They made statements about misunderstandings and family complexities. They leaned heavily into the baby, but even the baby couldn't fix a lie that large. It followed them like smoke. Every smile now came with a second glance. I watched from a distance, not with joy exactly, but with peace. For once, I wasn't the one left explaining. I wasn't the one scrubbing shame off my skin. They were, and they did it to themselves. As summer came, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and reread the notes from the shelter. Dozens of thank you cards from young mothers I'd never met. You made me feel like I mattered. This is the first time I've ever had a real party. I didn't know people like you existed. That was the legacy I had wanted all along. Not a picture on a backdrop, not a forced smile in a family album, but memory, dignity. A moment someone would carry with them and say, "Someone saw me, someone showed up." September rolled around. I knew the baby had been born. There was no phone call, no announcement. I found out the same way strangers did on social media. Perfect lighting captioned in lowercase. Welcome Liam Edwards 6's 14 ounces of love. No mention of me, no grandma tag, no nod to the woman who had almost built them a palace to welcome him into. I stared at that post for a long time. And then I stood up, walked to my desk, and pulled out a card. Cream embossed. Simple. I wrote by hand. I paid for love. I expect respect. Love me or don't. No signature, no return address. I slipped a crisp 50 into the envelope. Not for them, but for the child. For the boy who didn't ask to be born into the chaos of curated cruelty. I mailed it the next morning and I never heard back. But that wasn't the point. That card wasn't a request. It was a declaration, a quiet end, a graceful closing of the door. I do not need them to say sorry, not anymore. The words wouldn't change what happened. They wouldn't stitch back the hours I spent sewing napkins, planning centerpieces, or whispering love into a nursery I was never allowed to see. An apology wouldn't rewind time or erase the ache of standing outside my own story, listening to laughter I wasn't welcome in. No, what I needed, what I still need was much simpler. To be remembered, not perfectly, not constantly, just honestly. To be remembered as a woman who loved with both hands, who gave when no one asked her to, who showed up long before she was invited and stayed long after she was dismissed. To be remembered as a mother who didn't always get it right, but never stopped trying. And most of all, to be remembered as a grandmother, not in title, but in truth. Because loving a child doesn't require blood, it requires presence. And presence, no matter how briefly offered, leaves a mark. I do not know what my grandson will hear about me when he grows older. I do not know what version of the story will be told, but if one day he asks who sent that card, the one with the quiet words and the folded bill tucked inside, I hope someone has the courage to say she was the woman who gave before anyone else even thought to. And to those of you watching, reading, maybe holding your own ache in your chest, I want to tell you something plainly. You are not alone. If your name was left off the invitation, if your seat was placed in the corner, or not at all. If your love was seen as inconvenient, outdated, too loud, or too heavy, I see you. Your worth isn't determined by who thanks you. Your love is not less real because someone pretended it didn't count. And your story? It matters. Even when no one claps, even when no one posts about it, even when the room goes quiet the moment you walk in. Because the truth, our truth, does not shout. It doesn't fight for centerpieces or hashtags or curated lighting. It waits. And when the time is right, it returns, not with fire, but with grace. Because revenge has no expiration date. But sometimes forgiveness for yourself is the warmest way to win. There is a quiet that settles over your life when you stop waiting for people to return. When you stop hoping they will suddenly remember the warmth of your hands, the sound of your laughter, the years you gave without expecting a receipt. At first, that quiet feels like abandonment. But eventually, if you sit in it long enough, it starts to feel like peace. After the storm passed and the headlines faded, I built a routine not rooted in them, but in me. I started walking again, just a half-mile each morning, Penny trotting beside me, sniffing the same stones with fresh wonder every time. I learned the names of neighbors I had once nodded to but never really known. Ellen, who grows the best tomatoes on the block. Mr. Washington, who's 93 and swears by classical music for heart health. Lacey, a young teacher who brings leftover muffins from her classroom once a week and insists on calling me Miss Jane. These people never asked who I used to be. They didn't care what had gone viral or what had been said behind closed doors. They knew me only as I am now, and that strangely was the most healing part. I joined a quilting circle at the library on Tuesdays. I started baking again. Real baking, not just box mixes and banana bread. I made cinnamon rolls from scratch and mailed them to the shelter. I taught one of the mothers there how to sew a hem, and she cried when the needle didn't break. "No one's ever taught me something useful before," she whispered. I smiled and said, "Honey, you've always been useful. The world just lied to you. There is power in small things. There is justice in joy. And there is a kind of strength that comes only after surviving betrayal with your soul intact." One afternoon in late fall, I got a letter. A real letter. No email, no text, just pen on paper. It was from my son. I opened it with careful hands. "Mom," it began. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a hypocrite. Maybe I am one. Maybe I always was." He went on. Apologies, explanations, memories. Some true, some rewritten by guilt. He said they were struggling, that the backlash had changed things, that Hannah wasn't the same, that parenthood was harder than they expected, that he missed me. At the end, he wrote, "Liam started saying grandma when he sees old pictures. We tell him stories about you. I just wish they were current ones." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part wanted to run to the phone to forgive it all, to pick up where we left off. But I didn't do either. Instead, I wrote one line on a small card and mailed it back. "I taught you how to say sorry. Now teach your son how to mean it." I haven't heard from him since. But again, that's not the point. The point is that I responded without bitterness, because there's a difference between closing a door and locking it forever. Mine is closed firmly but not sealed. Some wounds are too deep to ignore, but not all require infection. Some truths must stand on their own without reconciliation. And sometimes you do not heal by opening the wound, you heal by planting something in its place. I planted rosemary for remembrance. I planted tulips because they rise again every year, no matter how brutal the winter. I planted a small lemon tree in a pot by the front door because my granddaughter, if she ever finds her way to me, will need something bright and sweet to reach for. And I planted peace every day, with every act of joy, not performed but chosen. Because love, real love, does not always get the storybook ending. Sometimes it gets rewritten. Sometimes it gets stolen. But sometimes, if you are brave and quiet and strong enough, it gets reborn. Not through revenge, not through retribution, but through reclamation, of voice, of dignity, of self. And that is the ending I choose. Not the one they tried to give me, but the one I earned, one gentle morning at a time. If this story stirred something buried deep within your chest, if you've ever stood outside a door you helped build, listening to laughter that forgot your name, then let me tell you, you are not alone. If you've poured your love into people who edited you out of their memories, if you've been called too much, too outdated, or just inconvenient, you're in the right place. This is Grammar True Stories, where silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Where being overlooked does not mean being irrelevant, just underestimated. Here we remember the women who raised children and were repaid with distance. The mothers who stayed up late sewing costumes and ended up cropped out of photos. The grandmothers who gave everything and were still told it wasn't enough. But now we speak, not to yell, not to beg, but to tell the truth clearly and completely. Because the truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be heard. So if your heart beat a little harder at any part of this story, if you recognized yourself in these quiet pages, I invite you to stay. Pull up a chair, subscribe to the channel, click that bell and join us, because when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.